Welcome to NCIX Tech Tips. Folks, another day, another GeForce GTX 700 series card. NVIDIA is coming full force and refreshing the entire lineup pretty much top to bottom systematically. We have the 780, we have the GTX 770, and now we have the GeForce GTX 760. Now, NVIDIA's branding for the 760 is quite simple. The new weapon of choice for gamers. NVIDIA recognizes, just like anyone does, that not everybody has $1,000 to spend on a GTX Titan. Some people are going to want that $249.99 price point and going to want a heck of a lot of performance for it. So the GTX 760 shares a lot of DNA with previous GeForce GTX cards that we've seen in the 600 series. In fact, on NVIDIA's own documentation, they're really talking mostly about the performance improvement that gamers can get over a 4-year-old card like the GTX 275 or a 2-year-old card such as the GTX 560, because this uses the same GK104 core that we've already seen in previous generation products like the GTX 660 Ti, which, given the 760 nomenclature for the new card, looks like it might be a bit of a replacement for there. Now, in terms of specs, I mentioned it's the same GK104 core, but there have been some changes to the configuration. The GTX 760 has actually fewer CUDA cores than the outgoing GTX 660 Ti. But wait, hold on. Same clock speed, but what we get with the GeForce 760 is a 256-bit memory bus compared to the 192-bit bus on the previous card. This does a couple of things. Number one is it dramatically improves memory bandwidth, even though we have the same 6 GHz GDDR5 memory. And number two is it allows 4 GB configurations with this card, whereas GTX 660 Ti was limited to 3 GB configurations. In terms of performance against the competition, NVIDIA is claiming anywhere from around 10 to 15% better than something like a 7950. And once a 7950 is boosted up, NVIDIA is still claiming that across a wide variety of fairly mainstream AAA titles, the GTX 760 is going to be a strong competitor. Now, in terms of the card design, we see some similarity to the last generation GTX 670, where we've got a blower-style cooler, memory chips on the front as well as the back of the PCB, dual DVI outputs, as well as HDMI and DisplayPort, giving you full support for NVIDIA 3D Vision Surround with 3 displays in surround and 1 auxiliary display, 2 SLI connectors, so we should have support for at least up to 3-way SLI on this card. It takes 2 PCI Express 6-pin connectors for its 170-watt TDP, and on the front of the card, just a simple plastic shroud with a GeForce GTX logo, as well as a quieter blower fan. So more on that in a moment. The GTX 760 is meant to support the latest games, so compared to a 560, you are going to get anywhere from about 50 to 60% better performance in games like Metro Last Light, giving you playable settings, even at 1080p with high details with this particular card. So you don't necessarily need a Titan to get the most out of it. More on that adaptive fan control. So it does have GPU Boost 2, which allows the GPU to control not only its clock speed and its voltage and power targets, but also its temperature. So you can actually set it up to say, look, I want to run at 80 degrees, I don't want any more or less than that. Or maybe I'm comfortable with 75 degrees. The choice is totally up to you, and the new fan controller, instead of having the fan reactively ramp up and ramp down all the time and make annoying noises, it will keep that fan very, very flat. So it's using their new temperature control fan algorithm. Also, it has full support for the latest NVIDIA technology. So that means Shadow Play, which is coming soon in the GeForce experience, is going to allow you to record the last 20 minutes of your gameplay on the fly. Extremely cool technology, especially if you make gameplay videos. Never miss a moment again. It's using the built-in H.264 encoder on the card, so it should be about a 5% performance hit when you have that enabled, compared to something like Fraps. That's very compelling. And remember, GeForce Experience also gives you the latest drivers, as well as recommendations for what settings you should be running your games at. Of course, you've got PhysX as well as TXAA, and full support for CUDA, including in applications like Adobe CS6. And I mean, all these features and all that are very interesting, but what about upcoming games that are going to utilize them? So Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag and Watch Dogs are both going to make use of DirectX 11 tessellation and TXAA, which, as you guys may or may not recall, is NVIDIA's special anti-aliasing technology. Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell Blacklist is going to have HBAO+, which is an advanced form of ambient occlusion. And then finally, getting into some other titles here, The Witcher Wild Hunt is going to support GPU PhysX, DirectX 11, tessellation, HBO+, and FXAA, which is pretty much the full gamut of technologies from NVIDIA. And finally, Batman Arkham Origins is going to support GPU PhysX as well as the same stuff as Assassin's Creed 4 and the upcoming Watch Dogs. So in short, guys, the GTX 760 is another generational improvement in performance at a lower price compared to the previous gen. For $250, you can get something that would have cost you significantly more last generation and delivers the performance you need for games today. With that said, I wouldn't recommend a GTX 760 if you're planning to run above 1080p with the latest games with high details. For that, you're going to want to step up to something like a 770 or a 780. Thank you for checking out this episode of NCIX Tech Tips. Don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this from ncix.com.